Hello and welcome. This is U-Report. It's that show where we talk about the issues that are most at heart with young people in this country. My name is Marcus.
My name is Melissa.
And today on the show we talk about a sensitive and delicate subject, and that is sexual violence against children. We have some friends who will be joining us for a discussion, a conversation, and it will help us clear up a lot of uncertainties about sexual violence, especially against children.
Yes. You know, in fact, Marcus, a lot of our U-reporters, when they SMS'd in, they were talking about sexual violence.
Yeah.
Experiences that happened to them, or questions regarding, is this okay, is this not okay? In fact, there was someone who SMS'd and said, one of my teachers is coming into the dormitory. This was a girl. She said, my teacher is coming
into the dormitory, in the girls' dormitory.
Yes, at night. Is this okay? I feel uncomfortable. These are the kinds of things we're going to talk about tonight.
We want to hear what you have to say about this issue, so we'll go and see what our U-reporters had to say about it.
First of all, violence against children has taken many different forms. Like most children are burnt. Like it's a result of unstable families. So most children are burnt, others are chased away from home, others haven't gone for school. Yeah, there are so many forms of violence. So I think parents, first of all, should take time to love their children. Like, this child is not a mistake. No child is a mistake. So take time and love that child, whoever he is, whether disabled or not. Just take time and love this child.
Just put yourself in that child's shoes and imagine the pain, the shame she's going through. So I believe all people who do such acts should be punished in ways, and it should be arrested, and the children who have gone through such acts, all being defiled, being mistreated, these children should be counseled, should be welcomed among us, the community members.
I have a case where a father could discipline the kid by piercing the ear somehow so that it could bring out blood, and there they would learn a lesson and never do it again. But the end result is that this kid will not learn. Instead, they become adamant and they will continue doing whatever is wrong.
In my community, children get some physical harm or violence. That is, some of them are beaten up by their parents and others are burnt. Those people who harm those children, the first thing is you are supposed to call them, guide and counsel them first. Then when you fail to guide, and when they fail after guidance and counseling, so you are supposed to enforce in law. Where law fails, kindly they are supposed to be at least taken to prison.
One of the things that should be done is the judiciary or the law or the police themselves should be very friendly. So that if a child is defiled in the first place, the first person they run to is the police, or the first thing they do is go to the right place. But because probably some police officers are very unfriendly, or they wear very tough faces, so when a child is defiled, they'll probably shut up about it or keep quiet about it. And yet I think if they are more friendly and then wear very beautiful faces or be friendly to the children, anywhere, roadside or home or in the community, first thing the children will do is they'll report the culprit. They'll even report just the bad touches even before the culprit gets to the defilement act itself.
Those children are the future generation. In time to come, myself will have died and others will also die. But those are the people who will cause a change. If like a child has been treated brutally, maybe extremely bad, at the end of the day, he or she will have to revenge as time goes on. He said, I was treated badly, therefore to do the same. If we protect our children, this will cause them to have room to attend or complete their education and sometimes be helpful. The reason is why some children drop from schools because they are treated badly. And sometimes they end up running out of their families. You find we have some street children, yet they have their parents because of that bad treatment.
Every day, about 1,000 children are newly infected with HIV. Most of them are born in sub-Saharan Africa. In order to reach an AIDS-free generation, we must get to 0 new HIV infections. How do we get to 0? Test mothers and babies and give them the medicines they need. Treat and counsel those living with HIV and also focus on prevention. Let's get to 0.
Welcome back to U-Report. My name is Melissa, and today on the show we are talking about a sensitive topic. We're talking about violence against children, specifically sexual abuse against children. If you want to be a part of the conversation, text JOIN to 8500 so your voice can be heard. Today we have 2 guests on the show to help us talk about this issue. Please introduce yourself for our audience.
Thank you very much, Melissa. My name is Peter Wahemka. I work with Raising Voices in the Violence Against Children Department, specifically on the media program. Okay. I'm very happy to be here.
Welcome,
Peter.
Welcome.
My name is Regina Kachwamo. I work with Uganda Youth Development Link. I'm the Child Protection Program Officer, and I work with children. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. We're
Welcome
glad to have
the
you
show.
here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start by defining sexual violence,
Yeah.
in particular reference to children. What definition do you use in the conducting of your duties or in dealing with communities when you talk about sexual violence?
Yes.
Child sexual abuse is an act of exposing or using children for sexual activities for purposes of personal gratification or pleasure.
Okay.
We can think about child sexual abuse in 2 ways. It can be contact sexual abuse, which means having actual sexual activity with a child. It can be non-contact, meaning exposing the child to sexual activities or sexual material. That includes pornography, that includes videos or pictures of people in a sexual way. So yeah, that's how we can define sexual abuse in short.
So
That's interesting, because I found that, especially the part of for the personal gratification, because I feel a lot of people, when it comes to sexual education in general, they say when it's too young, if it's too young, then it's sexual abuse. But with that component of it's for personal pleasure, what then becomes an appropriate conversation to have about sexual activity with young children?
I would imagine if it's in terms of education,
Yeah.
it would be appropriate to talk about things, because you're helping young people to grow up,
Okay.
especially responsibly. We have a problem of HIV/AIDS, for example. But what Regina is talking about is violence.
Yeah.
In other words, you're not doing education.
Okay.
You are seeking pleasure from...
which is the key component in the description, that the person inflicting the abuse is seeking pleasure.
pleasure.
Now, in this day and age,
And there's an element of power.
Right.
an abuse
So,
of
because as an adult, you have power over a child.
Right.
it's interesting that you bring up the concept of power, because it has been said in some circles that sexual violence is most likely going to be carried out on a child by a total stranger. Is that true?
Children live in an environment where they live in homes, they live in communities, they live in schools, they go to churches, and they meet people who have power over them, people who have power to take decisions and most likely look after them, or children they look up to for protection. In the situation we're talking about, in the area we are in, we see children being abused by people who are closest to them.
Wow.
So everyone in the community, everyone wherever children are, is a potential abuser.
We need to go to a quick break. If you want to be a part of the conversation, text JOIN to 8500. We'll be right back. Thank you.
My name is Omara Daniel. I'm 18 years old. The people, when they see the lame person, they think it got nothing to do. You see me today sitting on a wheelchair, but I'm schooling also. I do like basketball. Playing basketball make me feel happy with my friends. The disabled people, don't sit down and think you are lame, you can't do anything. You can make the world shine.
Welcome back to U-Report. If you just joined us, In studio today, we are talking to, we're talking about, my mind is all over the place now because this topic is very disturbing for me personally as a father of 2 boys. But we're talking about sexual violence, and in particular, violence of a sexual nature against children. In the studio with us is Regina and Peter. Regina is from Uganda Youth Development Link, and Peter is from Raising Voices. Before we went to the break, we were talking about the non-contact aspect of sexual violence against children. Peter, if you could just walk us through that again and just bring some of those who are joining us up to speed, and then we carry on the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. I was saying sexual abuse is not random.
Yes.
If it's random, most likely it will be a stranger. But most of the abuse that goes on in our communities, in our schools, in our homes, where children think these adults are protecting them or are providing a safe environment for them. And because it's not random, it takes time. Yeah. Meanwhile, the child is being groomed so that when it reaches a point when the adult wants to pounce on the child doesn't know what is inappropriate and what's appropriate.
What kind of conduct happens in this time you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, an uncle will provide niceties, you know, like bribes and, you know,
sweeties,
my favorite
rubbers and pencils.
Yes,
yeah.
my favorite niece, you know,
Okay.
the best dress, and, you know, things like that, so that the child thinks this is my favorite uncle. But the person has ulterior motives.
Yes.
Yes,
And
Regina.
almost often they develop a relationship where the child always has to come back to them. And sometimes, and almost always, they use threats. If you ever say something about this to anybody, I'll kill you, I'll deny your education, you'll not go back to church, or something that they really like the most. So it's about creating a situation where the child depends on the abuser. Yeah, so they don't have to meet and talk to other people about it.
And also because I think in Uganda, or in our culture, parents are not good at talking with their children.
About sex.
Not just sex, about things.
Just basically, I think the conversation with the child is not looked upon as something expected of a parent. It's more of, I give orders and you fall in line.
Yes.
So we don't share or talk about issues together.
Yes. And yet we have to have an ongoing conversation with children about, you know, whether they feel safe, you know, what their fears are, you know, aspirations, things like that.
Whether they feel safe.
Yes.
Regina, help us understand. How does a child know that this relationship with Uncle X has gone from safe to unsafe?
Right.
Because like you say, it is very difficult to, it's built on trust. So at what point does a child know that wasn't a healthy touch?
And is there a difference? I would even think there's not necessarily a difference, because the niceties in the beginning are leading up to something. So from the beginning, it was unhealthy, right?
I acknowledge
but
that.
the child didn't know. So.
Yes, I totally acknowledge that, because the relationship between the abused and the abuser is kind of like, I'll protect you. You can always come back to me when you need anything. You don't always have to go to any other person. But I think children know. Children do understand from an early age that there are certain parts of the body that are not usually up for anybody to touch. And so when someone touches it and tells them, you don't have to say to anybody, in their mind, they know, why don't I have to tell my mommy about this? Why don't I have to tell my friends? So they know, but because they are bound by this communication with the abuser, that you don't have to tell anybody. It's only me you can trust. So it takes time, it takes courage for them to come out and speak about it. But also considering that in our culture, issues of sex are not discussed by adults openly. And
it's hush, yeah? No, you don't talk about these things in public.
Yeah, Marcus, I wanted to say, in addition to what Regina is saying, you'll find that in most cases when a child says, Uncle so-and-so
did this,
said this or did this, you know, it could be flipped back to the child. This child is imagining things.
Has no
She's saying
respect for the
things,
other.
you know.
Yes.
Especially if that uncle or that person is held in
respected.
in high regard. Yeah. So sometimes because like I was saying, we don't have a decent conversation with our children.
I'd like us to look at that aspect of what does a healthy conversation with your child about sexual violence look like in this day and age. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, how do I get involved in talking about these issues? It's very simple. Go to your mobile phone, go to the messages, and text the word JOIN to 8500. It's free. It works across all networks. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation today because your voice matters. We'll be back with more on U-Report.
My name is Kumakechi Dennis. I'm 17 years old. I am totally blind, but my mind is not blind. Very many people are blind about the disabled. Me is the living example that disabled can do a lot. A blind person can use a computer, though he or she cannot see. I am moving together with the world because disability is not inability. It is not inability.
Welcome back to U-Report. My name is Marcus. If you just joined us, today we're talking about sexual violence against children. What does a conversation on sexual violence look like at home and at school?
A healthy
Yeah,
conversation.
maybe I'll add on to what the things Regina talked about. For example, there's sexual intercourse, because sometimes we don't mention these things. In our African culture, we don't, speak out. But sexual intercourse, I think everybody knows what sexual intercourse is. Catcalls, like if a child is passing through the main central taxi park, you'll hear men whistling and, that alone is abuse.
Yes,
because,
it is.
they are subjecting somebody to actual abuse.
Yes.
It may not be contact, but it makes them feel abused.
So when a child goes to talk to their parent at home, private parts are often given a name.
Chuchu.
Chuchu, wee
Willy,
Dudu,
Susu.
Susu, don't table.
Mosquito bites.
We don't call parts by their name, and that makes it very difficult for children to report. So again, what does a healthy conversation on sexual violence look like? Because a child goes and tells their mother, "Mommy, uncle touched my woo," and so what is that?
Yeah. I wanted to say in the beginning that it's easier when you've had a conversation with your children
Before.
It's not just about sexual violence. The conversation, how was your day in school?
You have an established relationship.
Yes.
They can come to you.
And then children will come to you and say, this happened to me.
Yes.
Then you don't shy away from it.
Because there is room to talk.
Yes.
And the child is aware that daddy or mommy talks to me about these issues.
They're safe.
Or about anything. Now, if you've had a decent conversation as the child grows, when these things come up, the children will come and report to you. But if they know you won't entertain any talk about such things, they'll suffer in silence.
But what if mommy or daddy is the perpetrator, is the one abusing?
Yeah.
Then what do I do?
That means there's no decent conversation between the two. And of course,
So Regina, at school, when we talk about sexual violence, how candid should the conversation be between a teacher and a child?
I want to first talk about the conversation at home. I think what is happening is that we are disguising things. When children are young, we tell them woo, susu, and whatever you've talked about. When they get into adolescence, we stop talking about that. As parents, we keep silent about it completely. We can no longer tell them that's an animal on your body or something like that. So we go silent, and
we hope the teachers will teach in
Yes.
biology class.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Which
So,
happens like once every 3 weeks.
I do think it's important for parents to learn to give children information about sex and sexuality as they grow, depending on their age. It's okay to tell a 2-year-old girl that is your susu, because they know that's where the susu comes from. Yeah? But as they grow into adolescence, we need to show them that these are parts of your body nobody should touch. These are things when someone does, it means abuse to you, and you shouldn't tolerate that.
So I should be able to tell my 2 sons that nobody should touch your penis.
Yes.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's okay.
very important.
Nobody should touch this part of your body.
So we are going to talk about
Okay, I'm having to think about my
It's
conversations
also-
with my boys.
It's also a bit of a cultural shift.
Yes.
Because if you're communicating for social change, there are things that you have to communicate. You're trying to save your child from
the harm that is
likely to
outside
occur.
the perimeter.
Because I believe all children are vulnerable.
Yes.
Regardless of whether you're a nice daddy, they are vulnerable to the uncle.
There's a predator somewhere watching.
Somehow.
We have to.
We do have to break, but we'll be right back to talk about it. Remember, text join to 8500. It's free across all networks. We'll be right back on U-Report. Thank you. Welcome back to U-Report, where today we are talking about the sensitive issue of sexual violence against children. And really, it is a pandemic that needs to be talked about. I mean, when our children are unsafe, it's just unacceptable.
This is U-Report. Go to the website, www.U-reportUG, and take part in the polls that we have every week, or better still, text the word join to 8500 and you become a U-reporter, and we can begin to share ideas, comments, and all other sorts of things that we'll be talking about. Let's go see what our U-reporters have to say.
These matters of defilement and rape are left to the lawyers to only do the you did it and the you didn't do it. And they forget there is someone against whom it was done, and this child against whom the case was, even though they eventually convicted someone and sentenced them maybe to life imprisonment or 10 years in prison, that's where the case ends in most cases, and they don't look at maybe having something in terms of compensation or trying to help this young girl go through the pain.
If I get a child who is sexually abused, I think those children need to be talked to. As in, you counsel them, you tell them this is not the end of the world. If they feel they can't live in that area where that practice was done on them, as in where that bad thing was done on them, then you move them to some other area where they'll feel free.
If a child is raped and approaches me, I'll give her an encouragement word, like don't lose hope, this is not the end of the world, you still have hope, so don't get scared, and you take that child to the hospital to be thoroughly checked, examined by those people. After that, we can counsel and guide her not to be traumatized.